The rain had been falling for hours. Outside the old brick police station on Maple Street, the sky was black, the gutters overflowed, and the wind howled like an angry animal. It was close to midnight and the streets were nearly empty. Only the buzz of the street lamps and the crackle of the radio inside broke the silence. Officer Daniel Hayes sat alone at his desk, finishing paperwork he hated. He had seen it all in his 15 years on the force. Accidents, fires, break-ins, even tragedies that still haunted his sleep. But tonight was supposed to be quiet. Nothing could have prepared him for the sound he was about to hear. The faint sound of nails on tile echoed down the hallway. Daniel froze. At first he thought it was a rat. But then from the shadows a tiny figure stumbled into the room, dripping wet, shivering and barely able to stand. It was a puppy, a muddy, trembling puppy, with tangled fur and huge, frightened eyes. Its paws left little puddles on the floor as it slowly walked toward Daniel's desk, and then collapsed with a soft whimper. Daniel's heart clenched. "Hey. Hey, little one," he whispered, standing up slowly. "Where did you come from?" The puppy looked up at him, and in those eyes was something Daniel had seen before. Fear, yes, but also desperation. It wasn't just lost. It was asking for help. Daniel knelt down and gently scooped it into his arms. The poor thing was so cold that he could feel it shivering through his uniform. Its belly was painfully thin, and yet it hadn't come in scared of humans. It had come here like it knew this was the one place where someone might listen. "Let's get you warm," Daniel said softly. He wrapped the puppy in his jacket and carried it to the break room. He set it on an old blanket near the heater and watched as it curled into a tight ball, eyes fluttering shut. Finally safe for the first time in who knows how long. But as Daniel looked closer, he noticed something odd. Around the puppy's tiny neck was a collar, not store-bought but handmade from frayed red yarn. And attached to it was a scrap of paper, soaked and nearly torn apart by the rain. Daniel gently unfolded it. Only 3 words were still readable. "Help. Please, hurry." His stomach dropped. This wasn't just a stray. Someone had sent this puppy, like a messenger, like it had run here for a reason. And if those words were real, someone out there might be in trouble. The puppy stirred and let out a soft cry. Daniel stroked its wet fur gently. "Don't worry," he whispered. "We'll figure this out." And in that moment he made a silent promise to protect this tiny life and to find whoever had cried for help. Outside, thunder rolled through the night. Something told Daniel that this little puppy hadn't just wandered into the station. Something told him this was only the beginning. By morning, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets washed clean and silent. The puppy was asleep in a cardboard box lined with towels, its chest rising and falling gently. Daniel hadn't gone home. He couldn't. He had spent the whole night trying to figure out the message on that wet paper scrap. Those 3 words haunted him. Help. Please, hurry. He kept staring at the red yarn collar. Who would send a half-starved puppy across a stormy city night to a police station? How could it even find the place? Something wasn't right. At 7:30 a.m., Officer Mia Thompson walked in for the morning shift, carrying 2 coffees. She froze when she saw the box. Daniel?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Why is there a puppy in the evidence room?" Daniel explained everything. The late-night arrival, the collar, the paper. Mia listened silently, her face slowly shifting from surprise to worry. "Could it be a prank?" she asked. "I don't think so," Daniel replied, shaking his head. "It came here like it knew where it was going. That paper wasn't random. Someone wanted us to find it." Mia knelt and gently stroked the puppy's ear. "Poor baby. It's skin and bones." They decided to call the local vet. Within an hour, Dr. Harper arrived, her white coat flapping like a cape as she strode in with her medical bag. She examined the puppy carefully, checking its heart, temperature, and weight. "She's about 10 weeks old," Harper said softly, "severely malnourished. But no major injuries. She's lucky." "She?" Daniel echoed. "Yes," Harper smiled faintly. "A little girl. You should give her a name." Daniel hesitated, then said, "Hope. Her name is Hope." Hope blinked sleepy eyes at him as if she understood, but then Harper found something strange. Tucked deep under the red yarn collar was a second scrap of something, a tiny folded corner of lined paper. It had been hidden so tightly that only a careful exam could find it. Daniel unfolded it slowly. His hands shook. It was written in messy pencil letters, faded but still legible. "We are trapped, basement, no food." Mia's eyes went wide. Trapped? Who's we? Daniel's mind raced. This wasn't just a cry for help. It was a message from someone who might still be alive, and who had sent this puppy as their last hope. How could a puppy deliver a message? Mia whispered. "I don't know," Daniel said, standing up. "But she made it here. That means they can't be too far away. She had the strength to run." He looked at the puppy again. Hope tilted her head as if urging him on. "We need to find where she came from," he said. "And fast." They pulled security camera footage from outside the station. It showed a tiny blur running from the west through the flooded intersection. Daniel traced the route on a map. That direction led to an old industrial district. Mostly abandoned buildings. Perfect place to hide, Mia muttered, or to be trapped, Daniel thought. They fed Hope soft food and left her in the care of the station receptionist, who instantly fell in love with her. Then Daniel and Mia grabbed their jackets and headed out. The city was quiet, but Daniel's heart was pounding. Somewhere out there, someone had tied a desperate note to a starving puppy and prayed she would find help. And against all odds, she had. As Daniel started the engine, he glanced once more at the station window. Hope sat in her box, watching them leave with wide, trusting eyes. "We'll find them," he whispered. "I promise." Then the patrol car rolled into the shadowed streets. Following the invisible trail that a little puppy named Hope had left behind, the city felt different as they drove west. The streets here weren't lined with shops and homes like the rest of town. Instead, abandoned factories hunched like skeletons, their windows shattered, their metal doors rusted and twisted. Graffiti covered the walls. Vines crawled up the cracked bricks like they were trying to reclaim the place. It was eerily quiet, too quiet. Daniel slowed the patrol car and scanned the road. "This whole area's been shut down for years," he murmured. "Hardly anyone comes here anymore. Exactly why it's the perfect place for someone to be stuck," Mia said, her voice low. They parked near an old textile mill, its faded sign hanging crookedly by one hinge. The air smelled of damp rust and dust. As soon as Daniel opened his door, the silence hit him like a wave. It was the kind of silence that made your own heartbeat sound loud. He crouched by a puddle near the sidewalk. "Look at this," he said. Mia joined him. In the thin layer of mud were tiny paw prints, smaller than his thumb. They trailed off toward the crumbling brick wall of the mill. Daniel's pulse jumped. Hope came this way. They followed the prints slowly, careful not to step on them. The prints went under a hole in the chain-link fence, then across a patch of broken concrete, and finally stopped at a metal grate set into the ground. The grate covered a storm drain, or maybe an old basement vent. It was loose. Mia knelt and touched the edge. "She's small enough to fit through this." Daniel stared at the dark hole beneath the grate. A faint smell of mildew drifted up from below, mixed with something else, something sour like spoiled food. Or rot? He swallowed hard. "This could be it," he said. They pried the grate open with a crowbar from the patrol car. The metal screeched as it came free. Beneath it was a narrow tunnel of bricks, leading down at an angle into darkness. A faint drip echoed from deep inside. "Do we have backup?" Mia asked. Daniel shook his head. "We call it in only if we find something. If this is just an empty basement, we'll look like idiots." Mia gave him a sharp look. "Or if it's something real and we go in alone, we could get killed." Daniel stared at the tunnel, thinking of the scrap of paper. "We are trapped, basement, no food." The words had been scratched out in desperation. Someone had trusted Hope to save them. He turned on his flashlight. "I'm going." Mia sighed and switched on hers. "Fine, but I'm right behind you." The air grew colder as they climbed down. The tunnel narrowed and the floor slanted steeply. Dust floated like ghosts in the beam of their lights. Every footstep echoed off the stone. Then they reached a door. It was wooden, swollen from moisture, and covered in deep claw marks, small ones, like a dog's. Hope's claw marks. Daniel's throat tightened. She had scratched and scratched to get out, then somehow squeezed through a tiny gap in the corner. She had fought to survive and to escape. He pressed his ear to the door. Silence. He knocked softly. "Hello, police department. Can anyone hear me?" "Nothing," Mia tried. "Is anyone in there?" A long pause. Then faint. So faint they almost missed it. A sound, a whisper. "Help." Daniel's blood went cold. He shoved at the door, but it barely moved. It was wedged shut from inside. He pulled back, braced his shoulder, and rammed it. Wood cracked. He hit it again and again. On the fourth slam, the door burst open with a splintering crash. The smell hit them first. Rotting food, damp concrete, and something sour, the scent of fear. Their flashlights swept across a large basement. The walls were bare brick, the ceiling low. Piles of broken furniture lay in the corners. Rusty pipes dripped from above, and then they saw them, 2 children. A girl, maybe 8. A boy, maybe 5. Huddled together in a torn blanket, their faces pale, their lips dry and cracked. They blinked in the sudden light, eyes wide with terror. "Oh my God," Mia whispered. Daniel dropped to his knees. "It's okay. It's okay. You're safe now." The girl tried to speak, but her voice cracked. "Hope, did she—" "Yes," Daniel said softly. "Hope found us." Tears welled in her eyes. "She's alive," he added. "She's safe." The boy let out a small sob and buried his face in his sister's shoulder. Mia pulled out her radio and called for immediate medical assistance. Her voice trembled, but she stayed steady, listing their location and condition. Daniel gently checked the children. Their wrists were thin, ribs showing, skin clammy. They were starving, but alive. "Where are your parents?" he asked gently. The girl's lips trembled. "Gone, locked us here. Said they'd come back." "They didn't." Daniel felt his stomach twist. Whoever had left them here had abandoned them, completely. If not for Hope, these children would have died in the dark, alone. He wrapped his jacket around the boy. Mia draped hers around the girl. "You're going to be okay," Daniel whispered. "You're safe now." In the distance, faint at first, they heard sirens, backup and an ambulance on the way. Daniel glanced toward the tunnel. He imagined a tiny puppy forcing her way through the gap, crawling through darkness, climbing out into the storm. Then somehow finding the one place where someone might care enough to listen. Hope had saved them. And now, everything would change. By the time they returned to the station, the sun was low and gold over the rooftops. The whole department buzzed with noise. Medics, social workers, child protection officers, news reporters who had caught wind of the rescue. The children were safe in the hospital, stable, recovering, wrapped in warm blankets. They hadn't let go of each other once. And when they had heard Hope's name, they both cried. Daniel carried Hope out from the receptionist's office, where she had been waiting. She wiggled in his arms, tail wagging weakly, and then, as if she could smell them, she looked around for the children who weren't there. "She knows," Mia whispered. "She knows what she did." Daniel felt something in his chest break, and then heal. In 15 years on the force, he had seen humanity at its worst. He had learned to keep walls around his heart. But this tiny creature had smashed through them. She had crawled out of the dark with nothing but love and courage, and saved 2 lives. They fed her soft chicken and let her sleep in the warmest blanket they could find. The whole station took turns visiting her, smiling like kids. Even the grumpy chief stopped by and muttered, "Good girl," before quickly leaving so nobody would see his eyes were watery. As the evening quieted, Daniel sat alone with Hope in the empty office. Rain tapped softly on the windows now, gentle this time, like a lullaby. "You did something impossible," he whispered. Hope curled on his lap and licked his hand, as if to say it wasn't impossible. It was just what love does. Then Mia came in holding a file. Her expression was serious. "We ran the parents' names," she said. "They're gone, vanished. The house they rented is empty. No bank accounts, no jobs, nothing. Like they disappeared." Daniel's jaw tightened. "They locked their kids in a basement and vanished." "Yes," Mia said softly. "The only thing they left behind was her." They looked down at Hope. She blinked up at them with wide, trusting eyes, like none of it mattered. Like the past didn't exist, only the love she felt right now. "We can't send her to a shelter," Mia said. Daniel shook his head immediately. "No, absolutely not. She saved them," Mia said. "She deserves a home." "She already has one," Daniel said quietly. "With me." Hope yawned, curled deeper into his lap, and let out the tiniest sigh, the sound of a soul finally safe. The hospital room was warm, filled with the soft hum of machines and the faint smell of disinfectant. Sunlight filtered gently through the blinds, painting golden stripes across the 2 small beds. The boy and the girl lay curled under pale blue blankets, their chests rising and falling slowly. The world around them buzzed with doctors and nurses and beeping monitors, but they seemed far away, floating in a quiet bubble of their own. Daniel stood in the doorway with his hands shoved deep in his pockets, trying to breathe past the lump in his throat. He had seen survivors before, battered women, lost teenagers, broken men, but there was something about these two that made his chest ache like nothing ever had. Maybe it was their silence. They didn't cry or scream. They just stared, like their minds were still trapped in the darkness where they'd been left. Mia came up behind him, holding 2 small teddy bears she had bought from the gift shop. "They haven't said a word," she whispered. "Not to anyone." Daniel glanced at her. "So they talked to me sparely, just enough to say their parents left them. Any leads?" He shook his head. "Still nothing. The house is abandoned. No utilities. No fingerprints. No sign of where they went. It's like they never existed." The words hung in the air like a shadow. Mia sighed and stepped inside, kneeling by the girl's bed. "Hey, sweetheart," she said softly. "I brought you something." The girl blinked, eyes hollow. Slowly, she reached out and took the bear, holding it like it might vanish if she squeezed too hard. Daniel crouched by the boy. "Hey, buddy," he said gently. "Do you remember your name?" The boy's lips moved, barely a whisper. "Chelsea." Daniel smiled faintly. "Eli, that's a strong name." He hesitated. "And your sister?" The girl lifted her head. "Lila," she murmured. "Lila and Eli. Names, real human names." Daniel felt something inside him loosen, just a little. They weren't just victims now, they were children, with souls and stories. "Lila," Daniel said quietly, "can you tell me what happened?" Silence. Her eyes flicked to the window where sunlight spilled across the floor. A small finger stroked the teddy bear's ear. Then she spoke. Barely audible. Mom said she'd come back. Daniel stayed perfectly still. "She locked the door," Lila whispered. "Said it was only for a night, but she didn't." Her voice cracked. "We waited, no food, no light, just dark." Tears filled her eyes but didn't fall. "Hope," she whispered. "Hope found a hole." I told her to find help. Daniel's vision blurred. He blinked fast, his throat tight. "You saved each other," he said softly. Lila nodded almost imperceptibly. The room was so silent that they could hear Eli's soft breathing. He had fallen asleep, one small hand clutching the edge of his blanket, like it was the only thing tethering him to this world. Mia met Daniel's eyes. She didn't say a word, but he understood her thought as clearly as if she'd spoken aloud. "We can't let them go back to the system. Not yet, not like this. They needed safety. They needed time. They needed love. And maybe, just maybe, they needed hope." That night, Daniel brought Hope to the hospital. The moment the puppy waddled through the doorway, the children changed. Lila sat up fast, eyes wide, and Eli gasped like he'd seen the sun. "Hope!" They both cried. Hope yipped and bounded straight to their beds, tail wagging so hard her whole body wiggled. She climbed onto the mattress and licked their faces, whining and squeaking like she'd been gone for years. The children laughed, thin, shaky, broken laughs that somehow still sounded like music. For the first time, their eyes shone. Daniel stood in the corner and watched silently, his heart twisting. It was like watching color return to something that had been black and white. Hope curled between them on the bed, tiny head resting on Lila's arm. Within minutes, they all fell asleep in a tangled heap of fur and small hands and soft breaths, and Daniel knew, with absolute certainty, that this was only the beginning of something much bigger than any of them could understand. Somewhere out there, a mystery waited to be solved. Someone had locked these children away and vanished. But here in this small hospital room, the miracle had already begun. The next morning, the case officially became something else. Detectives from the Missing Persons Unit crowded into the conference room at the station. The air buzzed with low voices, paper shuffling, the smell of burnt coffee. A photo of Lila and Eli sat in the center of the table. Beside it, the red yarn collar. Daniel sat with Mia on one side, their faces tired but alert. Detective Alvarez, tall and sharp-eyed, leaned forward. "So let's go over this again. 2 children found locked in an abandoned mill basement, malnourished but alive. Parents missing. No IDs, no birth certificates, no school records." "Nothing?" "Nothing," Mia confirmed. It's like they never existed. Except they did, Daniel said. They had names. Lila and Eli. Those could be fake, Alvarez muttered. They're kids, Daniel snapped. Not con artists. Alvarez lifted a brow but said nothing. Another detective, Rourke, cleared his throat. And this dog, the one who found you. Not found us, Daniel corrected quietly. She came to us, on her own, Rourke frowned. How's that possible? Because she believed in something, Daniel said simply. That's more than I can say for most people. There was a long silence. Then Alvarez spoke again. We ran prints from the basement door and the furniture. All partial, degraded. No matches in the system. What about the house they were renting? Mia asked. Empty, Alvarez said. No furniture, no utilities. Neighbors say they only saw them once, months ago. A man, a woman, and 2 kids, kept to themselves. Never spoke. So they were hiding, Daniel said. Yes, Alvarez agreed. And then they vanished. He tossed a thin folder across the table. Inside were grainy photos from an old surveillance cam outside the mill. The timestamp was 2 weeks earlier. The images showed a man, tall, gaunt, hoodie pulled low, carrying 2 heavy duffel bags into the building at night. Then nothing. No footage of him leaving. No footage of the children entering or exiting. It was like they had appeared out of nowhere, and he had disappeared into thin air. Daniel stared at the photos until they blurred. There was something about the man's posture, rigid, paranoid, like someone who had spent years looking over his shoulder. What if he wasn't abandoning them? Daniel said slowly. What if he was running from something, and something caught him? The room went quiet. Mia looked at him. And left the kids behind? Daniel nodded grimly. Because he thought locking them up was the only way to keep them safe. Safe from what? Alvarez demanded. Daniel didn't answer because he didn't know, but deep in his chest he felt it. The prickling tension of something bigger lurking just out of sight. This wasn't just a case of abandonment. This was something else. Something darker, and if they didn't find the truth soon, it might come looking for them. That evening, Daniel drove back to the hospital alone. Hope sat in the passenger seat in a tiny harness, ears perked. She looked out the window like she was scanning the world for danger. Or maybe for something familiar. Did you see where they went, little one? Daniel murmured. Did they say goodbye? Hope gave a soft whine. At the hospital, the nurse said Lila had been asking for him. When he entered the room, she was sitting up, braiding Eli's hair clumsily while he giggled. Hope leaped onto the bed and they both squealed with joy. Officer Dan, Lila said shyly. Can Hope stay tonight? Daniel hesitated, then nodded. Just tonight. Her smile lit up the whole room. He sat by the bed and watched them play. And then out of nowhere, Lila said something that made his blood run cold. They were scared, she whispered. Daniel blinked. Who? Mom and Dad. Lila's hands stopped moving. They said, if anyone found us, don't tell them our real names, Daniel's breath caught. Your real names? He said carefully. Lila. Are Lila and Eli not your real names? She stared at him for a long, silent moment. Then she shook her head. Daniel sat frozen outside the window. The sky darkened and somewhere far away, thunder rumbled, soft but growing. The children had been given false names. Their parents had vanished without a trace. And a starving puppy had been sent like a messenger to bring the truth to light. Whatever this was, it was only just beginning. The next morning, Daniel sat alone in the records room. Sunlight streamed through the dust-speckled windows, landing on stacks of old files and fingerprint cards. The building hummed faintly with distant phones and typewriters. On the desk, before him lay a blank form where a name should have been Lila and Eli weren't their real names. Those words had kept him awake all night, echoing through his head like a ghost. He typed both names into every database. Missing children, foster care, birth records, school registries. Nothing, not even close matches. It was like the kids didn't exist at all until the night Hope came pounding on the police station floor. He leaned back in his chair and rubbed his tired eyes. Still nothing. Mia asked softly. She stood in the doorway holding 2 mugs of black coffee. Her hair was tied back, but there were dark circles under her eyes too. They were both drowning in this case, and neither of them wanted to stop. Not a single trace, Daniel muttered. It's like they were erased. Or hidden, Mia said quietly. Daniel looked up. Mia set the mugs down and pulled a thin folder from under her arm. I talked to one of the social workers at the hospital. She said when Lila was half asleep last night, she said something weird. What? She said, we're not allowed to use those names anymore. Daniel stared. Allowed by who? Her mom, Mia said. Apparently before they left them, their mom told them to forget their names. To become someone else. Daniel felt the back of his neck prickle. So they were running from someone. Or something, Mia whispered. They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the old radiator filling the room. Then Daniel reached for the evidence bag holding the red yarn collar. He held it gently, like it might shatter. This isn't just a collar, he said. This was their lifeline. Their mother made it. She trusted this puppy to save her kids. Mia nodded. And it worked. Daniel stared down at the collar. Then for a brief moment his vision blurred. Not from tears, but from sheer disbelief at the enormity of what had almost been lost. They had been seconds from dying in that basement. Seconds. And somehow, hope had saved them. Later that afternoon, they visited the hospital again. The children were in the playroom, sitting on the floor with Hope curled in their laps. Lila was building a tower of blocks, while Eli carefully placed small toy cars around its base like guards. The second they saw Daniel, both children's faces lit up like tiny lanterns. Officer Dan, Eli squealed. Hope's teaching us how to be brave, Lila said. Completely serious. Hope wagged her tail and barked once like she agreed. Daniel crouched down, smiling faintly, but inside he was still a storm. Hey, he said gently, I need to ask something important. Is that okay? Lila's smile faded a little, but she nodded. You said your real names are different. Can you tell me what they are? She hesitated, her fingers tightening on the block in her hand. Mom said, if we say them, bad people can find us. Bad people? Daniel echoed softly. Who? Her lip trembled. The men in black coats. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. Mia and he exchanged a glance. Lila, he started. That's not my name, she whispered. Daniel stopped cold. The room suddenly felt smaller, like the walls were pressing in. What is your name? He asked gently. She leaned closer, eyes flicking nervously to the window as if she expected someone to be watching. My name is Arya, she whispered. And Eli is Noah? Daniel felt the breath leave his lungs. Real names, finally, a key. Arya and Noah, Mia said softly, kneeling beside them. Those are beautiful names. Don't tell anyone, Arya whispered. Promise, I promise, Daniel said quietly. But can I use them to help keep you safe? Arya nodded just barely. Noah pressed his face into Hope's fur like he was trying to disappear. His tiny voice trembled. The men hurt Daddy. Daniel froze. What do you mean? They came at night, Noah said. They had big black coats. Daddy said run. Mommy cried. Then we were in the basement, and they were gone. The words were like shards of glass in Daniel's chest. This wasn't abandonment. This was something much darker. He looked at Hope, who was watching him silently with those wide brown eyes as if she already knew. Thank you, Daniel said softly to the kids. You were so brave. They said nothing, but Arya's hand found his, and small and cold and trembling, and squeezed. And in that moment, he silently swore, whatever this is, I will find the truth, and I will protect them. The night rain returned. It lashed at the station windows as Daniel and Mia huddled over the caseboard in the conference room. The photos of the mill basement were pinned beside the blurry surveillance image of the man with the duffel bags. Strings of red thread crisscrossed like spider webs. The room smelled of old coffee and damp coats. Arya and Noah, Mia murmured, writing the names in big block letters at the top. Step 1. Find proof they exist. Daniel stared at the photo of the man. Step 2. Find out if he's still alive. They had sent the new names to the national database, but so far no hits. If the parents had deliberately erased all records, they could have been living off the grid for years. Mia flipped through the duffel bag photos again. If the man didn't leave, maybe he's still inside the mill, hiding. Or buried, Daniel said quietly. They sat in silence. Then something strange happened. The radio on the desk crackled, a faint hiss of static. Then a voice, Unit 27. Disturbance reported, 540 West Ash. Abandoned mill, Daniel's head snapped up. That's the mill, he said. The same one. They were already grabbing their coats. The mill loomed like a dead giant in the rain. Their flashlights cut through the darkness as they moved silently inside, boots crunching on broken glass. Water dripped from the ceiling, echoing. The basement where they had found the children was sealed now, yellow tape across the door. But something was off. The air smelled wrong, like old metal and smoke. Then Daniel saw it, muddy footprints on the floor. Large, heavy, fresh. Someone had been here recently. They followed the prints deeper into the main factory floor, a vast, empty space littered with rusted machinery. Lightning flashed through broken windows, briefly illuminating a shape near the far wall. A man, tall, gaunt, a hood pulled low over his face, exactly like the figure from the surveillance photo. "Police!" Daniel shouted. "Stop!" The figure bolted. They gave chase, their footsteps slamming on the concrete. The man darted between rusted beams, slipped through a gap in a collapsed wall. Rain slashed at their faces as they burst out into the alley behind the mill. The man was fast, too fast, but just as he vaulted a chain-link fence, his hood blew back for a split second. Daniel's heart nearly stopped. It was the same sharp cheekbones, the same hollow eyes, the same jawline as Arya. He was their father. "Stop!" Daniel yelled again, but the man vanished into the storm, swallowed by the darkness. They stood panting in the rain, soaked, hearts hammering. "He's alive," Mia breathed. Daniel's hands shook as adrenaline roared in his veins. "And running. But why didn't he come back for them?" Mia whispered. "Why send a puppy?" Daniel stared into the black mouth of the alley, lightning flashing behind him. "I don't think he left them," he said quietly. "I think he was being hunted." Back at the station, Daniel sat alone in the dark office. Rain tapped against the windows. Hope slept curled in his jacket on the desk, tiny chest rising and falling. He stared at the photo of the man, the father, and saw again the fear in Arya's eyes when she whispered, "The men in black coats, who were they running from? And how long until those men realized the children had survived?" A chill crawled down Daniel's spine. The truth was closing in like a storm, and for the first time in years, he was afraid. Not for himself, but for them, for Arya, for Noah, and for the tiny heartbeat asleep on his desk, the one who had saved them all. The old house stood like a skeleton against the darkening sky. Its broken shutters clattered in the cold wind, and the smell of mold floated through the cracks in its walls. Daniel stood in the doorway, flashlight in one hand, gun in the other. The front room was empty now. The strange noises they'd heard before, those soft scratches, had vanished, leaving behind a silence so heavy it pressed on their chests. Mia swept her beam across the splintered furniture. "If anyone's here," she whispered, "they're hiding." Daniel moved toward the stairs. They creaked like old bones beneath his boots. "Or they can't get out," he muttered. They split up, Mia to search upstairs, Daniel to the basement. The basement door was locked from the outside with a rusted chain. Daniel's gut tightened. Why would anyone lock a basement from outside unless they wanted to keep someone in? He radioed Mia quietly, found the basement. "It's chained." "I'm cutting it." "Be careful," she answered, her voice low. Daniel pulled a crowbar from his belt and jammed it into the lock. Metal screamed as the chain snapped. He swung the door open, and a rush of cold, damp air hit his face. The smell was sharp, like wet earth and decay. He switched on his flashlight and started down the stairs. They were steep and crumbling, disappearing into blackness. His light swept over stone walls, rotting beams, and puddles that shimmered like mirrors. Then he froze. Tiny scratch marks were etched into the wood near the base of the stairs. Not random scratches, frantic, repeated gouges, like someone had clawed at the wood until their fingernails bled, and near them, lying on the floor, was something that stopped his breath. A child's shoe, small, pink, caked in dust. Daniel crouched and gently picked it up. His throat tightened. Suddenly he heard it again, faint, almost swallowed by the silence. Tap, tap. He swung his light toward the far wall. Nothing, only stone and shadow. "Hello?" His voice cracked slightly. "Is anyone down here?" No answer. But the tapping came again, slower this time, fainter. Daniel moved closer, careful with every step, and then noticed something strange. Part of the stone wall looked newer than the rest, like it had been rebuilt recently. And from behind those bricks came the sound, tap, tap, tap. His heart thudded. Someone was behind the wall. "Mia," he shouted up the stairs. "Get down here now!" Mia appeared seconds later, breathless. He pointed to the wall and she immediately understood. Together, they began smashing through the bricks with the crowbar. Dust exploded into the air. The smell of damp earth grew stronger. Then Daniel's bar punched through and air rushed out from the other side. A small cry echoed from within, high, broken and human. "Hang on," Daniel shouted, smashing faster. "We're coming!" The hole grew wide enough for their lights to reach through. And what they saw turned their blood cold, a tiny crawl space, no taller than 3 feet. And inside it, huddled together like frightened birds, were 3 children. Their faces were hollow, their lips cracked, their eyes wide with terror and hope. They were alive, but barely. Mia dropped to her knees and reached through the hole. "It's okay," she said, her voice trembling but soft. "You're safe now. We are police." The oldest child, a thin girl maybe 9 years old, flinched back, pulling the smaller ones tighter. A boy of about 6 clutched her shirt with shaking fingers. The smallest, a toddler, lay limp in her lap, barely conscious. Daniel swallowed hard and lowered his gun. He knew that look in their eyes, the look of people who had stopped believing rescue was possible. "It's over," he whispered. "You're safe now." The girl's lips moved. At first, no sound came out. Then a faint whisper, "Hope." Daniel's chest tightened. "Hope, the puppy?" She nodded slowly, tears streaking the dirt on her face. "We sent her. Please, help my brother." Daniel's throat burned. The puppy. This little girl had tied that desperate note to Hope's collar. And somehow, impossibly, the puppy had reached them. "We need paramedics," Daniel said to Mia. She was already on her radio calling for backup, her voice shaking with urgency. Daniel smashed more bricks until the hole was wide enough. The girl helped lift the toddler to him first. The child was light as air, skin cool but still breathing. Daniel wrapped him in his jacket and handed him to Mia. Then he reached back for the boy, who clung to his neck with silent tears. Finally, he gently pulled the oldest girl out. She collapsed against his chest, sobbing soundlessly, her ribs showing through her torn shirt. "You're safe," he murmured, holding her tight. "Hope saved you." "She did it." The girl cried harder. Within minutes, the sound of sirens pierced the night. Red and blue lights washed over the crumbling house as ambulances and patrol cars screeched to a halt. Paramedics rushed in, taking the children onto stretchers with blankets and oxygen masks. Neighbors gathered on the street, whispering in shock. No one had even known this house was occupied. As the children were carried away, the girl turned her head toward Daniel. Her lips barely moved. She was the only way. The door was stuck, and no one came. "She came," Daniel whispered back, tears slipping down his face. "She found us." And for the first time since finding her, he realized what Hope had done wasn't just instinct. It was almost a choice. She had fought through the storm, starving, terrified, and somehow made it to the only place that could help. A tiny life had saved 3 others as the ambulances drove away. The weight of what they had found pressed down on Daniel like a storm cloud. This wasn't just a rescue. This was a crime scene. Someone had locked those children down there. Someone had abandoned them to die, and whoever it was might still be out there. Daniel looked at the dark windows of the house. The wind howled through the cracks like distant screaming. "We're not done," he said. Mia met his eyes. "No, we're just getting started." The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's Hospital hummed softly, a sharp contrast to the chaos of the night before. Daniel stood by the window of room 407, watching the city wake up beneath a golden sunrise. Cars moved like lazy beetles on wet streets. Somewhere out there, life went on as usual. But not for him. Behind him, 3 children slept in separate beds, thin figures wrapped in warm blankets, IV lines gently humming as fluids flowed into their starved bodies. They looked safe now, but Daniel couldn't shake the image of them huddled underground in that pitch-black crawl space, waiting for death, until a little puppy saved them. The door opened quietly. Mia stepped in, holding 2 cups of hospital coffee. "Any change?" she asked softly. "They're stable," Daniel replied, taking the cup. "Dehydrated, malnourished, but alive. That's a miracle." "No," Daniel said, staring at the sleeping children. "That's Hope." They both turned as the oldest girl stirred. Her eyelids fluttered open, and for a moment confusion clouded her gaze. Then she saw Daniel and flinched, pulling the blanket up like a shield. "It's okay," he said gently, stepping closer but keeping his voice low. "You're safe. No one's going to hurt you." Her lips trembled. Where is Hope?" Daniel smiled faintly. "She's at the station. Warm, dry, and probably eating more than she can handle." Something softened in the girl's eyes. A tiny breath of relief escaped her. "My name's Daniel," he continued. "Can you tell me yours?" There was a pause. Then, barely audible, "Lila." "That's a beautiful name," Mia said softly, pulling up a chair. "Lila, we need to understand what happened so we can help you. And your brother and sister." At the mention of them, Lila's face tightened with worry. She glanced toward their beds where the boy and toddler still slept deeply. "Your little brother and sister are safe," Mia reassured her quickly. "They're getting better." Lila's shoulders relaxed slightly, but her eyes were still distant, haunted. "They locked the door," she whispered suddenly. Daniel and Mia exchanged a sharp glance. "Who did, Lila?" Daniel asked gently. "Who locked you in?" Lila stared at her hands. Her knuckles were scraped, nails broken from clawing at those walls. "Emmett and a woman," she said slowly. "They brought us there. Said they would come back, but they never did." "Do you know their names?" Mia asked carefully. Lila shook her head. "They wore masks, like doctors. They said Mommy told them to keep us safe. But I don't think Mommy really said that." Tears filled her eyes suddenly. "I think Mommy is gone." Daniel's heart cracked. He knelt by her bed. "We're going to find your mom," he said firmly. "And the people who did this. I promise." She studied his face for a long moment, as if trying to decide if promises were real things. Then she whispered, "Hope believed in you, so I will too." Daniel felt his throat tighten. "That's enough for me," he said softly. Mia placed a gentle hand on Lila's blanket. "Rest now, sweetheart. We'll be back soon." Lila hesitated. "Wait, the house. There's a trapdoor." Daniel froze. "Where?" "In the basement. Under the dirt. That's how they came in and out. We heard it sometimes." Daniel and Mia locked eyes. "This was it. Their only real lead. Thank you, Lila," Daniel said. "That helps more than you know." As they left the hospital room, the door clicking softly behind them, Mia whispered, "We need to go back." Daniel nodded grimly. "And this time, we're not leaving until we know who did this." The sun was setting when they returned to the old house. It looked even worse now, cordoned off with yellow tape. Windows broken, sagging into itself like an exhausted giant. The silence around it felt unnatural, like even the birds refused to come near. Daniel ducked under the tape, flashlight in one hand, crowbar in the other. Mia followed close behind. Their boots crunched on shattered glass as they stepped inside. The air was colder than before, and the smell, faintly chemical. Daniel's instincts bristled. They headed straight for the basement. The hole in the wall still gaped open, showing the tiny crawl space where the children had been. Blankets and empty food packets were scattered like whispers of suffering. Daniel swept his light over the dirt floor. "We're looking for a trapdoor," he said quietly. They searched every inch, moving old boards scraping through the dust. At first nothing, just rotten beams, dead spiders, and silence. Then Mia's beam caught something. A line in the dirt, a perfect rectangle, almost invisible. "Here," she whispered. They cleared it together, brushing away layers of grime until a wooden hatch revealed itself, its edges sealed with metal clasps. It looked disturbingly new compared to the decay around it. Daniel's pulse pounded in his ears. "Ready?" he asked. Mia nodded. They pried it open. A rush of cold air poured out, carrying the smell of gasoline, mold, and something acrid that made Daniel's eyes sting. They climbed down a narrow ladder into a hidden room beneath the basement, and what they saw made their stomachs twist. The underground chamber was lined with cages, small, rusted cages. Some empty, some holding shredded clothes, and in one corner a pile of children's toys, broken dolls, blocks, tiny shoes like trophies. On the wall, written in smeared black paint, were 4 chilling words: "Safe until we return." Mia's face went pale. "Oh my God!" Daniel's fists clenched. This wasn't just a place where 3 children were hidden. This was part of something bigger, something organized. Someone had built this place to hold children. A faint noise cut through the silence, the soft whir of a hidden camera. Daniel spun and spotted it in the far corner, half buried in shadow. A tiny red light blinked. "They're watching," he hissed. He grabbed the camera off the wall and shoved it into an evidence bag. Then his light caught something else, a box of papers tucked behind the cages. He tore it open. Inside were notebooks, filled with names, dates, ages, each line like a blade. Some names were crossed out. Others had stars. Mia's voice shook. "These aren't the only kids." Daniel's jaw hardened. No, this was just one stop. He scanned the last page. There, who scribbled just 2 weeks ago, and it was a name that made his blood freeze. Lila, age 9. They had planned to take her somewhere else. The only reason they didn't was hope. "Bag everything," Daniel said sharply. "We're not leaving this place empty." They spent hours collecting every scrap of evidence. When they finally emerged from the basement, the night had fallen deep and cold. The house loomed behind them like a corpse. Daniel stood by the patrol car, staring back at the dark windows. They were going to disappear, he whispered, and no one would have known. But they didn't, Mia said, because of her. Daniel thought of Hope, the tiny bundle of courage that had fought through the storm to save lives. She hadn't just delivered a message. She had stopped a nightmare, and now they had a new mission. Find the people behind this and end it before another child vanished forever. "Let's bring her here tomorrow," Mia said suddenly. "Let Hope see this place, so she knows she won." Daniel smiled faintly, though his eyes were still hard. Yeah, she deserves to see the darkness she beat. They climbed into the car, the evidence box between them, and drove off through the silent streets. Behind them, the house stood empty. But somewhere in the dark city, the ones who built it were still out there, watching, waiting. And they had no idea that the smallest hero in the world was coming for them. The precinct was silent except for the faint hum of computers. Daniel sat at his desk, his head buried in his hands, the open evidence box beside him. Papers were scattered like fallen leaves, old notebooks from that underground room, smeared with mold, filled with lists of names. He hadn't slept. He couldn't. The words written in black paint on the wall still burned in his mind. "Safe until we return." It wasn't just cruelty. It was organization. Whoever had built that underground room hadn't done it for the first time. There were routines, rules, and Lila and her siblings were just the latest in a long chain. Mia walked in quietly, setting a cup of black coffee on his desk. Her face looked as tired as his, but her eyes were sharp, burning. "Anything new?" she asked. Daniel rubbed his temples. "Ran all the names through missing children database. Only half showed up. The others, no records. That means they were never reported," Mia murmured, "or were taken so young no one noticed." He pushed the papers toward her. "There's something else. Look at the initials on the last pages." She scanned the scribbled notes. Every name had 2 or 3 letters beside it. TR, MW, KL. It's like codes, Mia said slowly. Like initials of whoever took them. Exactly. The last entry has Lila 9TR, whoever TR is. They were planning to move her soon. Mia sat down. Then TR becomes our first target. They spent hours building a timeline from the notebooks, piecing scraps together like broken glass. Many names had stars next to them, which chilled Daniel more than anything. Stars usually meant complete. Then something clicked. Mia found a crumpled receipt hidden between the pages, dated only a week ago, for gasoline and canned food from a station 20 miles north, paid in cash. At the bottom was a faded signature. T-Row. TR, Mia whispered. Daniel's pulse jumped. "We've got them." He typed T-Row into the department system. Dozens of results flooded in, but only one lived anywhere near the abandoned house. Travis Rowe, 42, listed as a part-time trucker with a history of petty theft and assault. Current address, a small farm on the outskirts of town. Daniel stood abruptly, shoving the receipt into a folder. "We're going. Hold on," Mia said. "We need a warrant." "We'll get it on the way," Daniel replied, already grabbing his jacket. "If Rowe is part of this, he won't sit still once he hears those kids survived." They drove in tense silence, the night pressing in around them. The countryside grew darker, emptier. When they finally turned onto the cracked gravel driveway, Daniel's gut twisted. Rowe's farmhouse stood like a shadow at the end of the road. No lights, no movement, but as they rolled closer, they saw something strange, a kennel near the barn. Dozens of empty cages stacked like rusting skeletons. "Animal cages," Mia said. "Or child cages," Daniel muttered. his hand tightening on his gun. They parked silently and crept toward the porch. The boards sagged under their boots. Daniel's flashlight caught muddy boot prints leading from the barn to the house, fresh ones. Someone was here. Suddenly, a floorboard creaked inside. Daniel and Mia froze. Then a shape appeared behind the cracked front window, tall, broad-shouldered, standing perfectly still. Watching them, Daniel's heart slammed. Then the shape moved, and the lights went out. "Police!" Daniel shouted, kicking the door. It flew open into darkness. The house smelled like gasoline and mold. Empty beer cans littered the floor. In the kitchen, a wall map was pinned with red string lines stretching across the state like veins. Dozens of towns, dozens of pins, Jesus, Mia whispered. Then they heard it, the faint slam of a back door. "He's running," Daniel shouted. They bolted out the back just in time to see a shadowy figure sprinting toward the fields, vanishing into the darkness. "Stop!" "Police!" Daniel yelled. But the man dove into the tall corn and disappeared like smoke. They stood gasping in the cold wind, the silence swallowing everything. He had escaped, but not clean. They had his name, his face from the window, and a house full of evidence. Mia turned to Daniel. "He's not just some creep. This is part of a network. Look at that map. He's moving them like shipments." Daniel stared into the dark where Ro had vanished. He thought of Lila, of her tiny whisper. "They said Mommy told them to keep us safe." "They're lying to these kids," Daniel said quietly. "To make them stay quiet." Mia's voice hardened. "Then let's burn their whole lie down." The next morning, Daniel returned to the hospital with someone very small trotting beside him on a red leash. Hope. Her fur was clean now, brushed into soft golden waves. A little pink bandage covered a healing cut on her paw. She trotted proudly through the hospital halls like she owned the place, her ears perked and tail wagging with each echoing step. Nurses and patients stopped to smile. "Who's this brave girl?" one whispered. "Her name's Hope," Daniel said, pride warming his tired voice. "She's a hero." When they reached room 407, he paused at the door. He wasn't sure what he expected, but when he opened it, his heart clenched. Lila was sitting upright for the first time, staring blankly out the window. Her little brother was coloring quietly beside her. The toddler slept curled against her leg. "Hey," Daniel said softly. She turned, and for the first time since he'd met her, her eyes lit up. "Hope," she gasped. Hope barked once and a happy, bright sound, and ran to her. Lila burst into tears as the puppy leapt into her arms, licking her face with frantic joy. The boy squealed with laughter. "Puppy, puppy!" Daniel swallowed hard as Lila buried her face in Hope's fur, sobbing. "She came back. She really came back." "She never forgot you," Daniel said gently. "You're her family now." Hope curled in Lila's lap like she had always belonged there. The boy giggled as Hope licked his fingers, and even the toddler stirred, reaching out a tiny hand toward her. For a few minutes, the room was filled with soft laughter, the first real sound of life Daniel had heard from them. Then Lila looked up at him, her tears drying. There was a new light in her eyes, not fear this time, strength. "Are you going to stop them?" she asked quietly. Daniel crouched beside her bed. "Yes, we found the man who was supposed to take you next. We're going to stop him, and everyone like him." She nodded slowly, stroking Hope's head. "Then I'll be brave." Like her. Daniel felt something settle deep in his chest, something solid, unshakable. This wasn't just about catching criminals anymore. This was about giving these children their future back. As he left the room, Hope still curled in Lila's arms, Mia was waiting in the hallway with a file. "Ro's truck was found abandoned," she said. "He's gone to ground, but the FBI's joining the case now." "Good," Daniel said. "Because we're not stopping." They walked down the hall in silence, their footsteps echoing like a heartbeat. Behind them, faint laughter rang from room 407, where a little puppy named Hope lay surrounded by the children she had saved. Daniel glanced back once, a small smile breaking across his tired face. "One tiny puppy," he murmured, "and she lit a fire big enough to burn their whole empire down." Rain lashed against the windows of the precinct. The storm outside felt almost alive, wild, angry, thrashing the world, as if it knew something dark was about to end. Daniel sat at his desk, surrounded by files, photos, and maps. The FBI team had arrived hours earlier, setting up a command post. Dozens of names from the notebooks were being cross-checked with missing person reports, and yet something gnawed at him. He kept seeing Lila's face, pale and hollow, whispering, "They said Mommy told them to keep us safe." Those words had never stopped echoing because if the kidnappers had told Lila her mother sent them, maybe they weren't just lying to comfort her. Maybe they knew her mother. "Daniel," Mia said, stepping into the office with a folder. "There's something you need to see." She set down a photograph, a woman, mid-30s, with soft brown eyes and a tired smile. "Her name's Emily Carter," Mia said. "Lila's mother." Daniel's heart lurched. "You found her?" "Yes." "And no," Mia hesitated. "She went missing 8 months ago. Her car was found abandoned near the same industrial district where we found the kids. She was reported missing, but the case went cold." Daniel stared at the photo. Emily looked like the kind of person who would sing lullabies even when she was exhausted. The kind who'd fight a storm for her kids. 8 months, he whispered. "That's almost exactly how long those kids said they'd been in that house." Mia nodded grimly. "We think she tried to escape with them, and they took her instead." Daniel's chest tightened. "So she could still be alive?" "Maybe," Mia said. "If she's not, we at least bring her home." Daniel stood, grabbing his jacket. "Then let's start with Roe. He's our link." That night, they sat with the FBI analysts going through the red string map from Roe's farmhouse. Dozens of pins crisscrossed the state. But one pattern stood out. A series of pins forming a crooked line leading to a remote location deep in the Pine Hollow forest. "Old logging camp," one analyst said. "Abandoned for 20 years. No electricity. No reason for anyone to be there. Unless they don't want to be found," Daniel said, and then they saw it. Next to the pin was a handwritten note scrawled in black marker. "E.C. Emily Carter." Daniel's pulse roared in his ears. "That's where she is." The FBI agent in charge, a tall woman named Rivera, looked up. "We go at dawn." Daniel shook his head. "We go now. Every hour counts." Rivera studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Gear up." By midnight, their convoy rolled silently down a dirt road swallowed by towering black pines. The air grew colder. The world grew quieter, like the forest itself was holding its breath. When they finally stopped, the camp lay ahead, a cluster of rotting wooden cabins sagging under moss. The moonlight washing everything in pale silver. It looked dead, but Daniel's gut screamed otherwise. They moved in silently. Guns drawn, flashlights off. Only night vision goggles glowing faint green. Daniel's heart thudded as they cleared the first cabin. Empty. The second, empty. Then they reached the largest cabin at the center. From inside, faint light flickered. Rivera signaled silently. The team stacked at the door. Daniel's pulse raced like fire in his veins. They breached the door, and what Daniel saw froze him where he stood. A woman sat chained to a post in the center of the room, her hair tangled, her body thin but her eyes burning with life. Emily Carter. She flinched at the sudden light, then blinked, staring at the badges at Daniel's face. Her lips trembled. "Are my children alive?" she whispered. Daniel's throat closed. "Yes," he choked out. "They're safe. You saved them." Tears streamed down her hollow cheeks. She collapsed into his arms as he unlocked the chains. "I knew Hope would find someone. I told her to run. I told her." Daniel's breath caught. "Hope? You sent Hope?" Emily nodded weakly, her voice breaking. "I raised her. Before they took me. She was just a baby. I trained her to follow my scent, and told her to find help." Daniel's knees nearly buckled. The tiny, starving puppy hadn't been wandering by chance. She had been carrying her owner's last hope across the city like a soldier. Emily Carter had trusted the smallest life she knew, and that life had won. They airlifted Emily out that night. Daniel sat beside her in the helicopter, gripping her hand as she stared at the stars through the open side door, silent tears cutting through the dirt on her face. "You're going to see them again," he said softly. "Soon," she only whispered. "They're all that kept me alive." Back at the precinct, as medics took Emily to the hospital, Rivera turned to Daniel and Mia. "Roe wasn't here, but she said he comes back every third night." "That's tomorrow." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then tomorrow ends it." The next night they set the trap. Dozens of unmarked cars ringed the Pine Hollow camp in the darkness. SWAT lay hidden in the trees. Drones hummed overhead. Daniel crouched behind a stump, his rifle trained on the dirt road. The forest was utterly silent. No wind, no birds. Just waiting. Then at 2:14 a.m., headlights glowed through the trees. A black truck rumbled down the road and stopped outside the main cabin. Rose stepped out. He looked exactly like the shadow Daniel had seen. Tall, broad, wearing a greasy jacket, a cigarette glowing between his teeth. He walked like someone who thought he owned the dark. Rivera's voice hissed through the radio. "Hold until he's inside." Rowe unlocked the cabin and disappeared. "Move." Rivera snapped. They swarmed. The door exploded inward. Flashbangs erupted in white fire. Rowe roared, diving for a gun, but Daniel tackled him, slamming him into the wall so hard the boards cracked. "Where are the others?" Daniel shouted. Rowe spat blood, grinning with yellow teeth. "Too late, cop." "Always too late." Not this time. SWAT dragged him out in cuffs, still snarling. In his truck, they found a laptop filled with shipment schedules, addresses, encrypted contact lists. It was everything. The entire network had been destroyed in one night. Rivera clapped Daniel's shoulder. "You just ended a monster." "No," Daniel said quietly. "Hope did." 2 weeks later, sunlight poured like honey through the hospital window of room 407. Lila sat cross-legged on the bed, drawing with her brother. The toddler clapped her hands at nothing, and Hope sprawled across all three of them, snoring softly. Then the door opened. Emily stood there for a moment. No one moved. Then Lila's pencil fell from her hand. Her eyes widened, filling with tears. "Mommy!" Emily burst into sobs and ran to them. Lila leapt into her arms, her brother clinging to her waist, the toddler squealing with joy. They collapsed into one tangled knot of arms and tears and laughter. Hope wagged her tail furiously, barking with pure delight as Emily hugged her too, burying her face in her soft fur. "You did it," Emily whispered to Hope, crying. "You saved us." Daniel stood in the doorway, silent, his chest tight. Mia wiped her eyes beside him. This moment was why they had fought through the darkness. Because the smallest soul in the world had carried the biggest love. Because Hope had not just saved lives, she had saved a family. 1 week later, the city gathered in the police courtyard. News cameras clicked. Children held signs that said, "Thank you, Hope," in rainbow letters. The chief pinned a tiny gold medal to Hope's collar. She sneezed and tried to eat it, and the whole crowd laughed through tears. Emily stepped forward, holding her children's hands. "We will never forget what this little life did for us," she said, voice trembling. "When everyone else gave up, she didn't." Lila leaned down and whispered in Hope's ear. Hope wagged her tail. Daniel felt his heart ache with something bright, something fierce. Not just pride, faith. Because Hope had proved something the world often forgets. Even the smallest voice can carry the loudest cry for help. If this story touched your heart, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to believe in miracles again. Subscribe to hear more true, powerful stories of courage and hope. What do you think? And did Hope somehow know she was saving lives, or was it just pure instinct? Tell us what you believe in the comments below.